Garie Beach is located within the Royal National Park on the outskirts of southern Sydney. What makes Garie Beach so special is a small community that continues to live there, upholding a strong connection to its historic past, beginning during the Depression in the early 1900s. The most prominent structures on the landscape are the small beach shacks that have survived since the Depression. The community began as crude camps, sometimes permanent tents, which later developed into shacks constructed from natural timbers covered with bark, sewn with potato sacks, driftwood, packing cases, canvas and other discarded material. Virtually everything had to be carried in by hand, in the early days as far as Helensburgh. This tradition of carrying materials and supplies in is alive and well to this day. The cabins are locally significant for their demonstration of a mid-20th century vernacular weekender-style holiday cottage. They were built between 1910 and 1950 on freehold land, and since then over 50 shacks were demolished because of the National Parks and Wildlife Service's policy, which sought to eradicate the shacks from the park. It wasn't until the 1990s that the shacks were protected under heritage listing, which now allows them to survive for at least another 20 years on licensing agreements. Around 200 of these shacks exist in the Royal National Park. The Little Garie cabin community comprises 20 cabins and a community hall. The community hall was constructed in 1950 and is complete with pool table, surf lifesaving equipment and memorabilia. It forms the cultural centre of the community. Each shack has uniquely retained their original designs. The characteristics of each shack were derived from the original owners, and although most of these shacks have been rebuilt, they were done so according to their original designs. Today, the community comprises a diverse group of people that have had a close connection with the area for most of their lifetime. Occupations range from day-to-day labourers through to medical specialists. There is a close sense of community that has a strong attachment to these shacks. The people that occupy these shacks are simply normal folk that have become lucky enough to have ownership passed on through generations. Some spend most of their time in these shacks and others visit every now and then. They are responsible for the infrastructure including power, water and toilets. Many shacks still contain original kerosene technology including old fridges and stoves. Although it wasn't until recently that the incorporation of solar and wind power has effectively replaced the use of gas power. This retaining wall is made from beer bottles dating back to the 1950s and has been an effective drainage system for many years. The shack heritage is recognised as a cultural landscape and as an example of the preservation of Australia's cultural heritage. They reflect the tangible heritage of the shacks themselves, but also the intangible, the strong connection of the people that worked so hard to have these shacks preserved. The Little Garie Beach community is reminiscent of Australia's cultural history. It reflects a time and a place that allowed for a free-range dwelling culture to operate outside of conventional society. It is an example of a conservation movement that demonstrates the power of the people working collaboratively alongside government institutions to protect a national treasure.